The leaders of this team say what they've found is very exciting and very convincing.
We had found dead bodies scattered or obvious signs of a siege or an attack. That would be the answer that we need.
115 people disappeared from an island off the coast of America in 1587. No bodies, no graves, no explanation left behind. For over 400 years, the world's greatest investigators could not explain it.
It is one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries, and it happened in our own backyard.
Every theory failed. Every lead collapsed. Then something changed. Scientists started looking in a direction nobody had considered before. What they found did not just solve the mystery. It rewrote everything we thought we knew about the beginning of America. The man who never came back. In the summer of 1590, a small English vessel was cutting through the waters off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Standing at the front of that boat was a man named John White. His hands were tight around the railing. His eyes were locked on the island, getting closer. He had been trying to get back to this island for 3 years. John White was the governor of a small English colony of 115 people who had sailed to America in 1587 to build a new settlement on a place called Roanoke Island. He was not just their leader. His own daughter Eleanor was among those settlers. And just days before he had sailed back to England, Eleanor gave birth to a baby girl named Virginia Dare, the first English child ever born on American soil, his granddaughter, a child he had barely held before he was gone. He had left because the colony was already in trouble. Food was running out. Supplies were dangerously low. The colonists themselves begged their own governor to sail back to England and return with help. White did not want to go, but they needed him to. So he left, carrying a guilt that would never leave him. He promised to return quickly. He did not. When White arrived back in England, Queen Elizabeth I had just issued a war order. England was at war with Spain, and every available ship was seized for the fight. No vessel was allowed to leave. White begged officials for months. He was ignored. His family was sitting on a remote island across the Atlantic with no food, no reinforcements, and no way of knowing if anyone was coming. In 1588, he finally managed to secure 2 small ships. But the captains he hired were greedy men. Instead of sailing straight to Roanoke, they diverted the voyage to attack Spanish ships and steal cargo. The plan failed badly. The Spanish fought back, robbed them, and left them broken. White was forced to sail back to England with nothing. His family stranded for another year because of that greed. He finally made it back to Roanoke in 1590. 3 years after he had left, he stepped off the boat expecting to hear voices, hammers, children, life. Instead, silence. The fort was still standing. The gates were intact. Nothing was broken. Nothing was burned. But the 115 men, women, and children were simply gone. No bodies, no graves, no blood in the dirt, no scattered belongings. Nothing that suggested panic or struggle. Just an empty settlement, sitting in the Carolina heat, completely still. And then he saw it, carved into the wooden post of the fort's entrance. One single word, Croatoan. White recognized it as the name of a nearby island and its indigenous people. But before he could investigate, a violent storm began closing in. His crew refused to go further. He was forced to leave. Again. He made one final attempt to return in 1593. That also failed. John White died sometime between 1593 and 1606. The exact date is not even known. He never found his daughter. He never found Virginia Dare. He never found out what happened to a single one of the 115 people he had left behind. The man who came closest to the answer never got to know it. But what he left behind, including that single carved word and a very particular map, would eventually crack this case wide open. 400 years later. The 400-year manhunt. After John White failed to find his people, the world kept trying. For 4 centuries, investigators, historians, and archaeologists threw everything they had at this mystery. And almost all of them failed for exactly the same reason. They were all looking for a catastrophe that never happened. The most popular theory was massacre. There was genuine reason to suspect it. In 1585, 2 years before the 1587 colony even arrived, an earlier English expedition led by a man named Ralph Lane had committed a horrifying act of violence against the local Secotan tribe. Lane became convinced the Secotan chief, a man named Wingina, was secretly plotting to destroy the English. So Lane's men launched a surprise attack before dawn. They stormed the village, killed several warriors, and cut off Wingina's head. They carried it back to their fort. The 1587 colonists arrived into a region that was already burning with rage because of what the English had done before them. They had inherited enemies they had never personally made. Then there was Spain. This was not just a theory either. In 1565, Spanish forces had sailed to Florida and massacred an entire French colonial settlement called Fort Caroline. Men, women, and children slaughtered on direct orders from the Spanish king. Spain knew about Roanoke. They had sent spy ships to the area. They had the motive, the capability, and they had already proven they would do it. The colonists were not just building a settlement. They were hiding from an empire. Then came something that poisoned the investigation for decades. In 1937, a theatrical play called The Lost Colony began performing every summer on Roanoke Island.